Thank you very much, Kieran Corley. On behalf of the Minister for Finance, I welcome the opportunity to respond to the Sinn Féin private member's motion on the rising cost of home heating fuels, and in particular their view that the 1 May carbon tax increase should be cancelled and that the excise duty on home heating oil should be temporarily removed. I will also address the proposed new regulations relating to solid fuels. At the outset, I wish to say that the Government proposes to table a counter-motion of its own, and I'm happy to move same. Kieran Corley. The Government fully recognises the seriousness of the current inflationary crisis in the fuel sector and the impact that this is having on broader society. However, the causes of the spiralling increases in fuel costs are beyond the control of government, and therefore it is not possible, as Sinn Féin acknowledge in their motion, to fully insulate all households from every price increase. We are living in unprecedented times. The global and extreme nature of this crisis is not something anybody could have envisaged a few months ago. The energy market is experiencing a perfect storm of global supply chain disruptions and the ongoing war in Ukraine. It is these issues that are driving the current rise in prices and not, as some would have you believe, the tax on energy products. Ireland's taxation of fuel is based on European Union law, as set out in the Energy Tax Directive. This directive prescribes minimum tax rates for fuel with which all Member States must comply. Ireland applies excise duty in the form of mineral oil tax to fuels used for motor or heating purposes. Mineral oil tax is comprised of a non-carbon and a carbon component. The carbon component is also referred to as carbon tax. Kerosene for home heating has a non-carbon component rate of 0. The carbon component is currently €84.84 per 1,000 litres. Deputies will be aware that the Programme for Government committed to increasing the amount that is charged per tonne of CO2 emissions from fuels to €100 by 2030. This measure is a key pillar of the Government's climate action plan to halve emissions by 2030 and to reach net zero no later than 2050. Deputies will also be aware that a significant portion of carbon tax revenue is allocated for expenditure on targeted welfare measures and energy efficiency measures, which not only support the most vulnerable households in society, but also in the long run will reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. It's also important to note that the Government has very little flexibility on kerosene from a VAT perspective. This is because it is subject to a VAT rate of 13.5%, which is provided for by way of a historical derogation that allows us to maintain reduced rates to certain supplies under Article 118 of the VAT Directive. These are known as parked rates and cannot go below 12%. If the Government were to reduce kerosene VAT to 12%, the saving would be very small, €20 per 1,000 litres, but there would be a considerable additional cost to the Exchequer. This is because we would also have to reduce all other areas currently subject to the 13.5% rate to this level, as we are only allowed to have 2 reduced VAT rates under EU law. As the 13.5% rate currently applies to about a quarter of all economic activity, and as well as fuel used for heat and light, also includes construction, for example, housing, labour-intensive services and general repairs and maintenance, it will cost in the region of €216 million to the end of October. While price trends are driven primarily by global factors, the Government made the decision to alleviate some of these impacts through the domestic taxation of fuel and other measures. Last month, the Government reduced excise duty on mineral oil taxes with effect from the 10th of March. This provided for a 20-cent reduction in the excise rate for petrol and a 15-cent reduction on auto diesel, with a proportionate 2-cent reduction for the excise on marked gas oil or green diesel. These measures were VAT inclusive and set to last until the 31st of August. This was estimated to cost €320 million. Last week it was announced that these measures would be extended until the 11th of October. The Minister for Finance is also providing for a further reduction in the excise rate on marked gas oil, which amounts to a VAT inclusive reduction of 3 cents effective from 1 May until the 11th of October. This excise reduction extension and a further reduction in the rate applied will cost an estimated additional €97 million. From the 1st of May and effective until the end of October, we are also providing for a reduction in the rate of VAT on the supply of gas and electricity from 13.5% to 9%, resulting in estimated annual savings of €49 on gas and €69 on electricity bills for households. This will more than offset the 1 May increase in carbon tax and will cost an estimated €46 million. The combined effect of the fuel tax reductions alone is over €460 million. These measures come in addition to the measures in Budget 2022 and the February package of measures to alleviate the impact of increased cost of living that households are undoubtedly experiencing at this time. Budget 2022 included a personal income tax package worth €520 million for this year, alongside a social welfare package of over €550 million, while the February additional package of measures made changes to the value of over €500 million that included an increase in the energy credit to €200 including VAT, estimated to impact just over 2 million households, a lump sum payment of €125 on the fuel allowance, which was paid in early March to almost 400,000 households, and an additional €100 payment announced in April. A temporary reduction in fares of 20% from the end of April to the end of the year to reduce the burden on people returning to the workplace and people using public transport. This will impact approximately 800,000 daily users. A further reduction of the drug payment scheme threshold to €80, which goes beyond what is proposed in Sláintecare. This will benefit over 70,000 families. The working family payment budget increase announced on Budget Day has been brought forward from 1 June to 1 April. Reduced caps for multiple children and school transport fees to €500 per family post-primary and €150 for primary school children, and a reduction in the public service obligation levy to zero by October of this year. Earlier today, the Government also agreed to the abolition of public inpatient charges for children. The evidence confirms that the measures taken by the Government to date are progressive. Recent analysis undertaken by the Department of Finance using the switch model has confirmed that the suite of recently announced measures more than offsets the carbon tax increases for all income deciles. In addition, the Government continues to drive public investment in energy efficiency, with an overall investment of €267 million this year, €118 million of which is allocated to making homes of those most at risk of energy poverty warmer, healthier and cheaper to heat. And we acknowledge the waiting lists and the need to make further progress in reducing that backlog as quickly as we possibly can. In response to increasing energy costs, new grant rates have been introduced that will cover approximately 80% of the typical cost of attic and wall insulation. These are very cost-effective upgrade measures that can be deployed rapidly and at scale this year. The typical cost savings from cavity wall insulation is €300 per year on a home heating bill. Cumulatively, the Government has spent approximately €2 billion to date on additional cost of living and welfare supports from Budget 2022 to present. The programme for government commits to introducing new restrictions on solid fuel so that the environmental and health benefits that have already been brought to our cities and towns under the current low smoke zones can reach every part of our country. This is because each year some 1,300 people die prematurely in Ireland due to air pollution from solid fuel burning. It's estimated that there are over 16,200 life years lost, while many people also experience a poor quality of life due to the associated short-term and indeed the long-term health impacts of this form of pollution. The Government recognises that turf cutting by citizens for use in their own home is a traditional activity across many peatlands. A balance must be struck between the need to reduce emissions and improve air quality on the one hand and respecting these traditions on the other. And it's important to note that no ban on the burning of peat is being proposed, but instead, as the counter-motion says, a regulatory provision will be made to prohibit the sale of sod peat in larger agglomerations while allowing the traditional sale in rural areas to continue. I understand that final regulations will be agreed by Government in the coming weeks that will ensure that while measures are introduced to enhance air quality, they will not impinge upon traditional local practices associated with sod peat, including localised rural trading and the sharing of turf with family members and indeed neighbours. This approach, Ceann Comhairle, will facilitate rural communities to continue to cut and burn sod peat for their own domestic purposes, while also reducing the use of sod peat in urban areas. In conclusion, Ceann Comhairle, the Government is deeply conscious of the negative impact that the rapid rise in consumer prices is having on society. Everyone in this House is aware that the reason for this significant inflationary pattern is because of matters completely outside of the control of government. But we have responded in a very significant way, as I've outlined in my remarks this evening. Therefore, I would ask the House to support the counter motion the government has put forward this evening. Thank you.